Hello, welcome back to another episode of my series Chop to the Top, where I'm trading my way up from a cheap car to a supercar. Last time you saw me working on a Toyota Hilux, which was in a really sorry state when it came to me. As well as being completely repaired and fixed, that truck got modified. Now, some people love that look, some people don't. So when it hit the market, it took a little while to go, but it has now left. But when I say it has left, I didn't actually sell the Hilux. Believe it or not, I have swapped it. So you may be wondering, what would I swap against that, in my opinion, beautiful Hilux? Well, let's head outside and I'll show you what's come in its place. Let's go. Right then, so here it is. This is a 2010 Land Rover Discovery HSE spec, so the absolute top spec example. This particular one is finished in Stornoway grey, which, you know, it might not be the most out there colour, but it is saleable. It's kind of mass appeal, so it's a good stock vehicle to have, I feel. Now, overall, this vehicle is very straight. It's in really nice condition. Now, believe it or not, this one has done 160,000 miles, which sounds a lot when you say it quickly, but for a 2010 vehicle, that makes it 12 years old, 160,000 miles, that's about right. That's sort of average usage mileage. And as we know, people do buy Range Rovers and Land Rover Discoveries to do miles, especially motorway miles, because they're big, comfortable barges. So high miles like that aren't really a problem as long as there is service history to support that mileage. Now, in this case, this one has got full service history. It has been very well looked after, and in actual fact, the chap I swapped the car with, he has just spent just shy of £4,000 in the last 3 months doing various bits and pieces to this vehicle. So you often hear how Discoveries are a bit of a nightmare and they always need work doing. It's probably not that fair. There are things that do go wrong, especially when they get to a certain age and a certain mileage. Well, this particular vehicle has had literally everything done on it that needed doing, and anything that potentially could go wrong. So I'm very comfortable with the mileage on it. The issue with this one, and as always there is an issue, and you're probably wondering what that is, because for me to have swapped it against a Toyota Hilux, there must be something wrong with it. Well, I'll show you a few of the things that I need to do. But really, compared to some of the things I've had in, it's really not that bad. First of all, and potentially most obviously, we've got this mark on the front bumper, which has been, someone's attempted to touch it up with repair touch-up paint, but it's not a great match, so that's something I'll have to address because it doesn't look all that good. The paint itself, from a distance, it looks okay. Stornoway grey, lovely colour, but the near side is a lot worse than the off side. Typically for a countryside vehicle, this side of the vehicle spends a lot of the time in the hedge, and you can see, if I catch it in the light, how hazy the paint is. So this will be having a full paint correction and it will be looking lovely once again. Again, near side issues. On the side step here we have damage, presumably it's bumped into a rock or a tree stump or something down a narrow lane. Not a problem though. I can sort that. Well, I'll have to change the step, I expect. All 4 tyres in good nick. They're Cooper Discoverers, so a really good sort of all-rounder tyre. You guys know I'm based out in the countryside, so these vehicles are very popular. So having a capable set of tyres that can do road and off-road use is a must. So those are a fantastic addition to this vehicle. The fact they're in such good shape really helps. Moving inside, I will show you a few more bits and pieces. Your normal HSE refinements. Really nice in here. No massive damage to any of the seats or the carpets or the dash. The only wound, and as I say, this vehicle has done 160,000 miles, is a small mark on the seat here. Pretty standard bolster wear, but it's not as horrendous as it could be. So very pleased. Again, the colour is kind of, you can't love it, you can't hate it. It's black and grey, isn't it? Everyone's going to sort of accept that, I feel. So it's a very neutral colour to have. Being HSE, we've got Harman Kardon sound system in it, so really fantastic quality audio there. Usual refinements like built-in nav, etc. But the biggest issue that this car has, and the reason I managed to swap it for a Toyota Hilux, is this. So that restricted performance warning that you saw on the dash is, I believe, part of the reason why the previous owner spent such large sums of money on this truck in recent months, chasing that fault. Currently that warning is permanent, and after a few miles of driving it will cause the vehicle to go into limp mode, which pretty much makes it undrivable over long distances. In addition to that performance warning, there's also a mystery suspension fault which seemingly at random locks the suspension in normal height only, meaning there is no adjustment available. This isn't as serious as the performance issue, but it's very annoying, so it's certainly another must fix for me. So the plan of action with this one is simple. Get stuck in and find out what is causing the error lights on the dash so that I can fix them, then make this Discovery look the best it can, and that means a small amount of bodywork followed by a paint correction. Other than that, there's just a few small jobs to do, such as replacing the rather battered remote keys with more modern items, bringing the faded headlights back to life, and giving the whole vehicle a thorough detail to make it feel and smell fresh, ready for its new owner. I'm starting with that restricted performance issue. To learn a bit more about this error, I need to speak to the car's diagnostic system, and for this I need an OBD scanner. Fortunately, my friends over at TOPDON were kind enough to send me their latest Bluetooth scan tool, the AD800BT. Using this more advanced scanner, I can easily connect to the Land Rover, automatically identify the vehicle, and run a full system scan to find out what the car thinks is wrong with it. Having done this, I can see that the restricted performance warning seems to be related to the water in fuel sensor, which is part of the fuel filter assembly. Taking a look underneath, I can see the fuel filter and its housing, and it seems that I may be in luck. According to the service history that I have with this vehicle, I can see that the fuel filter was changed within the past few months. However, looking at the filter housing, it is clear that there's something missing. There should be a sensor plugged into the harness, but it's completely absent. It seems that whoever changed the fuel filter simply didn't replace the water sensor, but surely this fix isn't going to be that simple. It isn't possible to buy just the sensor that is missing, so I've had to buy a whole new fuel filter and housing. However, as these Discoveries are known to have issues with the wiring in the filter housing, it's probably best for me to change the whole lot anyway. After a bit of a fight, the old filter, housing and loom is removed from the Discovery. It doesn't look particularly bad, but as mentioned before, it makes sense to change the whole assembly now anyway. With the part now fitted and the error code cleared using the AD800, I can drop the truck down and take it for a drive. Much to my amazement, that's worked, and the annoying issue which has caused so many headaches has been fixed for just £120. Sometimes Lady Luck is just on your side, I guess. So, still high from that win, I feel that I'm on a roll. It's time to tackle the suspension fault. Whilst I've had the Discovery in the workshop, I've noticed that the suspension appears to drop when left for a few days. I'm not sure whether this is related to the suspension fault on the dash, but either way, it's certainly not right and it needs to be sorted. I'll start by taking a few arch height measurements before leaving the truck for a few days and then re-measuring. After a couple of days, it's become obvious that the front suspension is dropping, but not the back. My suspicion lies with either the front air struts or the front air suspension valve block leaking, as I've experienced this in the past with an older Discovery. So to check this, I'll spray everything with soapy water in order to see if anything bubbles up. The good news is that nothing appears to be leaking when I've done this test, but that is also the bad news, as I'm none the wiser as to what could be causing the front to drop. I'm now suspecting an internal leak within the valve block, so the next logical step is to remove the block itself and rebuild it with new seals. Now that the front valve block has been rebuilt, I'm turning my attention to the compressor. The service history that I have with the truck tells me that this compressor was replaced just 2 years ago. However, the error code I'm getting suggests a less than adequate fill rate to the reservoir, so this certainly sounds like a plausible culprit. In addition to that, I've had some discoveries in the past where the compressor's air dryer has been at fault and the medium within it breaks down and causes a restriction in the flow rate, so this is certainly worth checking out. With the compressor removed and the dryer stripped, I can see that the desiccant medium inside it is well past its best and the filters are almost totally blocked, and furthermore, there's a notable amount of moisture present within the dryer body, so this could well be the cause of the suspension fault. A few days later, the compressor rebuild kit that I ordered has arrived, but unfortunately it's the wrong kit for the style of compressor that I have, so whilst I wait for the correct kit, I may as well get on with cleaning up the rusted filter gauzes. Once blasted clean, I need to protect the gauzes with an etch primer and then paint them to prevent them from rusting again once fitted. As I'm still waiting for the correct compressor dryer rebuild kit to arrive, I think it's also worth removing the air reservoir to check for leaks, as this could also be a cause of the slow fill error. Once removed, I can see that the reservoir isn't very old, so it's almost certainly part of what was fitted recently to try and resolve these issues. Nevertheless, I'll give the tank a clean up and I'll cover it with soapy water before pressurising using my airline to check for any bubbling. Fortunately, the reservoir is completely leak free. It makes sense for me to rebuild the middle valve block in the same way as I did with the front whilst I'm working in this section of the truck. At last, the dryer rebuild kit has arrived, so I get to work replacing the filters, desiccant and seals before refitting the compressor to the vehicle. With the compressor and both rebuilt valve blocks now back in place, it's time to lower the truck again and try the air suspension. However, it's not long until there's an issue. Whilst the Discovery is running through its lift cycle, I heard quite a loud pop. Upon investigation, I found that the front valve block was unplugged from its electrical connector. Here's what was happening. As you can see, for some reason, after a few seconds connected, the electrical plug is blown off with some force. After a bit of investigation, it seems that the plug receiver is being pressurised, however there are no external leaks. To ascertain this, I used the finger from some latex gloves over the plug receiver, sprayed with some soapy water. Doing this proved that the connector itself was being blown off by internal pressure, which suggests that the seals inside are at fault. To overcome this, I refitted the original valve seals, which solved the problem. However, I'm not happy with using the old seals, so I'll revisit this valve block a little later. For now, I can at least continue with testing the compressor to see if the dryer rebuild has solved the suspension warning light. As the dryer rebuild doesn't seem to have fixed the issue, I'm going to have to dig a little deeper. I know that the airlines for the front struts can sometimes chafe through, causing minor leaks on the system. However, as I want to take a look at the airlines in their entirety, I think that the best option is to remove the front bumper, rerun the airlines externally and then leak test them. This test proved that there were no leaks on the airlines concerning the front suspension. However, I did notice an aftermarket pipe joiner in one of the lines, which, although completely airtight, does suggest that there has been a chafe-through leak in the past. Now that I'm sure that these lines are in good health, I can rebuild the front of the truck. However, before refitting everything, I'm going to take this opportunity to cut and polish the headlights, as these are looking a little bit tired and faded, and a freshen up will help the look of the truck for sure. So the truck is back together, but I'm no closer to fixing the suspension issue. The scanned codes are telling me that the fill rate of the reservoir is subpar, and I suspect an internal valve block leak is also causing the front suspension to drop on its own. This is going to take some more thinking about, so I'll come back to this later in the episode. With the suspension fault still at large, I'm turning my attention to the body damage on the Discovery. This isn't a huge deal, to be honest, just a light bit of damage to the front bumper corner, which is very common on these big flat fronted vehicles. Also, there's a small crack on the passenger side wheel arch. This is a small enough area for me to fix and blend the paint repair using aerosols. I start by removing the fog light bezel and then flatten down the damaged areas to remove any flaking or high spots. Next, I channel out the crack on the wheel arch using a small diamond multi-tool. This valley will allow me to add in an appropriate covering of filler before primer. I should also add that I have strengthened the crack on the back side of the arch using the plastic welding technique covered in the Hilux video. With that done, it's time to flat back the area around the crack one more time ahead of cleaning everything up and adding the first pass of body filler. When the first lot of filler has dried and been flatted back, I add a second pass of finer putty filler and leave overnight to let it fully sink and set. The next day, I take down the final lot of filler and clean up before masking off the surrounding area and priming. I'll give this 2 to 3 coats of primer before letting it fully dry and wet flatting. If the crack repair needs any more putty at this stage, I'll add it. However, in this case the repair is flush, so it's time to clean up again and lay down some colour. Again, I'll give this several coats of base colour, starting with a light dusting and moving to progressively more uniform coats. I get a lot of questions about blending aerosol paint repairs, and it can be quite tricky to get it right, but essentially, in my opinion, a successful blend comes down to 2 things: a decent shade match paint and practice. There really isn't any substitute for those things. Now that the base coat is fully cured, it's time to add the clear coat. I start by giving the base coat a clean with degreaser and a wipe over with a tack cloth before laying down the clear coat. Again, I start with a light dusty coat before moving on to the slightly heavier wet coats. You'll also notice that I'm using a heat gun in my spare hand. That is because I'm not working in a spray booth. In fact, I'm in much less than ideal conditions, so using the heat gun with caution allows me to keep the workpiece warm, which helps to prevent puckering and blooming in the clear coat. The technique that I use for blending the clear coat is to blend beyond the base coat blend, in the knowledge that the final stage, a flat and polish, will seamlessly mix the new clear coat into the old. Now that the clear coat has thoroughly hardened, I flat it back using 1200 grit paper until the whole area has a uniform dull finish. At this stage I give it a wipe down and get to work with my machine polisher. I use a medium firmness foam pad and compound to achieve a smooth glossy finish. Something else that's been bugging me about this Discovery is that although it has two functional keys, they're mismatched and they're both absolutely battered. I'll swap the internals of these keys into two brand new, later generation key shells. This is simply a case of stripping the old keys down and moving the internals across to the new key shells. However, in my case, as I'm changing to later generation style key shells, the board within the key needs a very small amount of material removing from its corner before it can fit into the new housing. Once that's done, it's as simple as transferring the old flip style blade across to its new hidden compartment, snapping it all back together and making sure all functions work with the truck. Now it's time for me to jump back into that suspension fault, and I've decided to simply replace the compressor, as although the one fitted has only been on there for a couple of years, I personally believe it's had a hard life trying to keep up with what was once a leaky system. In addition to this, I'll also replace the front and the middle valve blocks for new ones, as I believe they're past their best too. I've got to thank today's sponsor, Max Speeding Rods, for supplying me with the new suspension components that I needed. When looking for reproduction OE quality parts, I tend to head over to my friends at Max Speeding Rods. Their European held stock and large parts catalogue are always helpful when I'm trying to get something back to its best, and this situation is no different. Within a few minutes of searching, I'd found what I needed on their website, and within just a couple of days they'd arrived at the workshop. It's perfect. So let's get on and fit these and see if our suspension fault has at last gone. With all of the new parts now fitted, it's the moment of truth. You'll notice that the front of the Discovery is at maximum drop here, as I've let all of the air out of the front half of the system. After a few minutes, the system is recharged by that new compressor and working perfectly. I'll give the system a quick test by taking the Discovery outside and running through all different height settings before going for a test drive to make sure that the light stays off. After a test drive of 25 miles, I'm very pleased to say the light has remained off, so I can call this job done. Now it's on to the last part of the process. As always, the final stage of a turnaround such as this is to give the vehicle a thorough clean and detail throughout, and this is something I've been itching to do to this dull Discovery ever since it arrived. I really want to tackle that hazy dull paintwork, but before I can bust out the machine polisher, I first need to give the truck a clean and then clay the paint all over to remove any ingrained dirt, etc. First, I'll give the Discovery a snow foam wash to help soften and remove the majority of the dirt and dust on the body and wheels. Whilst I wait for the snow foam to dwell, I'll give the wheels a quick agitation to help shift that baked on brake dust before blasting everything off with the pressure washer. Now it's time to clay, so the Discovery is brought back into the workshop and I get to work with a clay mitt and some soapy water to help with lubrication. For bigger vehicles such as this, I tend to use a clay mitt rather than a traditional clay bar, as it allows me to work much faster. However, in stubborn areas there's no beating an old-fashioned clay bar, so I still use that as well. Once I'm finished clay barring, the Discovery comes back outside to have the soap residue rinsed off, and then it's allowed to dry before it's back inside ready for the machine polish. To demonstrate the state of this 12-year-old paint, I'll start by doing a 50-50 comparison test patch, which will demonstrate the kind of transformation we can expect to see from this process. This can be quite tricky to show on silver paint, but I think it's pretty obvious in this case. Once the polishing is done, it's time to move on to the interior of the Discovery. As mentioned before, there wasn't too much wrong with the inside of this truck, it just needed a good clean to make it smell a bit fresher. First up, I clean all of the door shuts before moving on to vacuuming the inside. Using a silicone hair comb cube, I can pull out all the loose hairs and fibres from the carpet pile, which makes everything a lot cleaner. Next, and with all the loose dirt removed, I move on to cleaning the leather and the stitching, as I'm pretty sure this hasn't ever been done before. Using a specific detailing brush, some detergent, a microfiber and a wet vac, I'm able to clean up and draw out years of hidden grime from within the seat folds. Finally, it's time to clean the door cards and the carpets before the engine bay gets a quick freshen up. Again, I know you guys have seen this a ton of times before, so I'll try not to bore you here. And just like that, the Discovery is reborn. This truck may now be 12 years old, but looking at it now with its glossy paint and lack of body damage, I think anyone would still be proud to drive this one. Inside, it looks and smells fresher than it has done for years, and more importantly, the dashboard is now free from warning lights. This truck was in need of a second chance after its last lot of warning lights were a bridge too far, and with a bit of luck and a whole lot of head scratching, I managed to give it just that, a second chance. This is truly a beautiful example of a world-renowned vehicle, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes next. Okay, so that is it, and the Land Rover is finished. Now, of course, this is chopped to the top, so we need to go over the numbers. Last time, at the end of the Toyota Hilux episode, I gave you a breakdown of costs there. So that truck, when all said and done, ended up costing me around £6,900 because although I only had a £6,500 budget to buy and fix that truck, I did go over slightly. So the overall cost of that was £6,900. Now, of course, this wasn't a straightforward sell one and buy the other scenario. I swapped the Land Rover. So in essence, this thing owed me £6,900 straight off the bat. Now, of course, there has been numerous costs involved in getting this thing ready. It wasn't horrendous, but there are costs involved. So rather than sort of using just the budget I had, I have, of course, added to the pot to get this one ready. So the breakdown of costs are as follows. The Discovery started by owing me £6,900 due to the straight swap against the Hilux from episode 6. The new genuine fuel filter, housing and wiring was £120. Paint and body material costs were low at just £35. The suspension parts came courtesy of today's sponsor, so another huge thank you to Max Speeding Rods, but for transparency, the retail cost of these parts is £249 for the compressor, and then £74 and £70 for the middle and front valve blocks respectively. Finally, cleaning consumables were around £10. So with everything taken into account, the total price is what you see here. So the Land Rover is now for sale. I'm hoping it will be a straightforward sell and buy situation next time around. This will sell. I can take an offer on it, of course, but I'm hoping it will sell and I'll buy something else rather than another swap. Now, of course, I'm not against a swap or a part exchange of any kind. It would just be a lot more preferential for me if this would sell for the asking price or near to it, and then I could choose what to buy next. But of course, that hasn't happened yet. So stay tuned and I'll update you with how things progress. So of course, if you're not subscribed, please consider doing so. And if you want to be notified when new videos come out, make sure you've got all your notifications turned on, including that bell logo. Until next time, guys, thank you ever so much for watching and I'll see you later. Cheers.